AI won't kill your job or your business. Somebody using AI will.
The whole point is like where AI meets the operational road, so we can make sure that the agents have the skills needed to power businesses where they need to be.
Welcome to the Implement AI podcast, the podcast where we explore the impact of AI on your business. I'm Piers, Linney, alongside my co-host and co-founder of Implement AI, Dr. Aalok Shukla. We cover the real-world applications and impact of how AI can be practically applied to drive growth and efficiency in your organization. We cut through the jargon to focus on actionable strategies and use cases to highlight the transformational power of AI. Let's dive into today's conversation.
Hi, I'm Piers.
Hi, I'm Aalok.
So today we've got some very interesting subjects we're going to go through in today's pod. But let's just talk about where we are and what we're doing. So we haven't really been traveling much. We've been heads down in the business, building our new platform as well, and just getting things working so that we're in a position to scale, because we are looking at fundraising actually, probably in May. We're looking at raising a seed round. We did our pre-seed to start scaling the business. But the main focus, Aalok, has been on our AI OS.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So like the whole point is like where AI meets the operational road, and, working with different clients, also developing the capabilities of our system, evaluating where the technology is going to be afterwards, so we can make sure that the agents have the skills needed to power businesses where they need to be, basically, right? I think that's the kind of key thing.
So hopefully you'll start seeing the podcast was sort of, we're working with a partner now to sort of professionalize it and scale it up. So from next week, we're hoping to start having guests on the show, actually. So we're looking at sort of a slight format where similar to what we've always done, maybe then bringing in a guest, could be a partner, could be a customer, could be an expert, someone from the AI sector, somebody from more suppliers like Microsoft and NVIDIA, try and talk about the points or talk around that to add more context and more insights. But today we thought the two things we're going to focus on. So one is the state of the art in agentic AI. So where are we? And we talked about the PR frontier, the tech frontier, the operational frontier, the production frontier. Another thing I think which we hear a lot about is this conversation about what are CEOs and CFOs actually buying, right? Is it what we talk about quite a lot? I'm not sure the AI companies do, because I don't think they want to sometimes talk about replacement. Are they buying augmentation, or are they buying human replacement? Or is it somewhere in the middle, or is it a combination of the two? So we're going to talk a bit about that as well on the show today. So if you don't know who Implement AI are, myself and Aalok are the co-founders. We implement AI. We do what it says on the tin, essentially. So we have a platform we're building called AI OS that enables you to deploy digital workers into your business with focus on sales, customer success, operational excellence, analytics. But the idea is that you come to us for managed digital workers. And that's what we're building, especially focused on the mid-market. So we'll talk more about that as we go through. So let's go into the stated AI agents, agentic AI, the marketing really. I've got some stats here. So I was doing some deep research last night. And it's really interesting the speed at which is great. I think they're under-smoking this. So the UK market, they say, and I'm sure they include AI and machine learning in these numbers, but it's saying it's 0.3 billion. I don't believe it's that big. And it's going to grow to 2.8 billion by 2030. I think it's going to be much bigger than that. So that's a 43% CAGR. We're also looking at UAE, at Implement AI. That's kind of 0.07 billion now, quite small. And they're seeing that grow to sort of, I think it's, 1 billion? Pretty big number. So let's see, it's a bit lower than that, but I can't be right here. It's got about a 10x essentially, one order of magnitude, 0.07 to 0.72. USA, 1.6 billion, potentially bigger than already actually, but growing to 13.5 billion. So you can see the market, the TAM for this is enormous. And the reason I'm sort of focusing on this is that what you're looking at, and we're going to talk about it later, is the automation of human resource. It's almost all knowledge work eventually, which it will be eventually. It's all about time horizons, whether it's 5 years or 10 years. And then there'll be physical labor as well. So it's enormous. I don't know what you think about those numbers.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I think almost 2 years ago when we just started Implement AI, I was talking a lot about this book, Exponential Organizations, which kind of came out in 2014, 2015, essentially, right? And the whole point there was why certain types of firm are 10x more productive and grow faster than other businesses. And those firms were the Ubers or the other kind of mobile platform companies empowered by AI and Google and Waze and examples like that. But at that point, that kind of technology and that kind of power was only accessible to people with huge budgets, basically, right? And so that book almost explained the kind of the trajectory and like how you can have like teams with it massively producing that other people can't do. What's happened now is that level of power has almost become available to anybody. It's a bit like drones, right? Military drones used to be very expensive and very, complex. And now, for example, military drones can be made quite cheaply and by many people. So the point is like the power has become democratized and it's become more widely available. So I think these figures, when you're talking about it, what you're really talking about is like what they're probably researching about is like the impact of like agentic AI as classic software potentially. But the actual difference is the whole workforce, because like basically the worker and the software that does the work are becoming fused into one. And, I see examples all the time for like, there was one firm, which is like an investment firm in the States. And they said that, for example, they have five team members full time, but they're having 130,000 conversations a month with potential investees, partners, different people like that, all are powered by AI. And he was basically explaining that they review pitch decks automatically, they give guidance, advice, because their target market is a small market, but they want to be as impactful as possible to the community so that the best deals come to them, basically, right? So think about that, right? 5 team members, 139,000 conversations a month, basically, right? In various different forms, enabled by AI. So I think this state of AI agents, it's absolutely there. I think there's absolutely some firms which have already shifted to this model of like, how can we almost like expand the capacity of our department or expand a new capability allowed by AI? But then these figures are just showing the kind of software parts of it kind of coming up, basically. But there's already examples, and we've talked about, Klarnas of this world and, even Shopify and stuff like that, for example.
And then also, there's reading something last night as well, researching this, saying that, is it ChatGPT's got 1 billion sort of users now. Users use it once a week. And people say, well, everyone's going to have AI. And you hear this phrase, don't you, that AI won't kill you or it won't kill your job or your business. Somebody using AI will. And everyone's saying, yeah, but that doesn't really hold water anymore because everyone's going to have AI. And it's just not the case, is it? Yeah, I talked to good friends of mine last week who are very capable, they're in business. And I just to say to them, I use AI, I use ChatGPT typically, mostly, to augment myself in almost any cognitive task. And they look at me blankly and say, well, I haven't actually got an account. Which account should I get? And I just think it's insane the amount of people that are not using it. Personally, if you're a leader, but also in a business. So I think these numbers are under smoke because I think the impact, isn't it? It's not just the usage. The impact can be, I don't know what you think, Aalok. I think I have at least 2x my output.
Yeah, more than that. So if you think about this, so we said before that AI will be like Spellcheck. Everyone will have it. It's not a competitive advantage, okay? So if you think about ChatGPT being the equivalent of Spellcheck, basically, right? So you've got you write a document and there's no spelling mistakes in it. Great. But is it a good document? Is it actually advancing anything on that area? Are you actually saying anything useful? Or is it just the cat jumped over the lazy dog and all that kind of stuff, basically, right? Which it kind of came over. So the point here is just like you said, the person using AI will outpower the person using it and not using AI. There's a nuance to that. It's the person that knows how to use AI properly and has domain expertise that they're able to critically evaluate the output of AI and actually help raise the standard of it. Because if you don't have critical evaluation skills and you don't know what good looks like because you don't understand the domain, you don't know everything, then it's basically like me going to using Chinese, for example. I asked ChatGPT to have a conversation with me in Chinese, but I don't know what it's saying and I can't evaluate what's coming back to me. And I've got no power in that game, basically, right? So many people, if they start using tools and they're in domains they don't understand, they think, oh, it's just done by AI. That's when rubbish occurs, basically, right? And that's where you get like a lot of issues with different things and very mediocre and very average work. And this week I wrote a guide specifically on that, essentially like how you need to actually like understand what good examples look like, what structured outputs, things. So I think coming to your point that there is 1 billion users and many people are using it in a very basic spell check like way, like a calculator or a spell check. But then in terms of like work performance going up, unless it's actually used in the right way, your performance could actually go down because you could actually have people that were doing something properly before and then now you're just getting garbage, basically, right? So I think that's the key thing because it's not about AI or not AI. It's about quality output or not quality output, basically, right? Guided by someone that knows what they're doing.
Yeah, garbage in, garbage out. I think also it's like you were saying there that I'm pretty good at prompting, right? But even I talk to people who use AI quite a lot and I say, which model do you use? I always use ChatGPT. I always use 4.0. I'm kind of like, well, that's kind of a generalist model. You should be using like 0.3 for really thinking and then 4.5 for writing. It's going to go quite soon, but 4.5 for writing,
or Claude or Gemini or whatever.
And they look at you blankly and think, oh, right, I didn't realize the different models. And then there's your kind of prompting, which is a whole different level. Anyway, so I think usage is not an indicator of the value being created. And you can still get ahead of the game by knowing how to use it. You've got different, I use Alok's favorite word, dimensions of AI, right? And so you've got the sort of platform giants. You hear a lot about, Google, Microsoft, even Amazon. They're all the big SaaS players. They're kind of churning out their version of what AI looks like. Then you got the vertical. So SaaS tend to be SaaS model, which we don't tend to follow, where you pay per month per user and you get a vertical AI that just does something. It does email or marketing or something in a particular sector, okay? And these companies are raising a lot of money. They're growing pretty quickly. And then you got kind of the open source, the kind of the open frameworks and those kind of models. And the question for them is, how do they create value? Do they start producing the end services, the agents, and deploy them into businesses? As we know, that's a whole different ballgame, actually, implementation. Then you got companies like us, where we're more horizontal, vertical expertise. What we want to create is a digital workforce that's fully integrated, and it kind of works together, and it's like a common memory. So let's get to those then. Platform giants. So what's your view on the state of it in terms of like Copilot, Google?
So let's zoom out, right? So over the last, let's call it 30 years, 40 years, there's been digitization of work, isn't it? Probably more than that, 50 years, basically, right? Where it went from paper, everything like that to digitizing documents, scanning things, e-signatures, all that kind of stuff. So that infrastructure exists in the world, right? So there's already softwares for everything, whether you're a vet or whether you're a roofer or whether you're whatever, basically. But they were all basically almost dumb. They basically would just store stuff, and it's basically compartments for different elements, basically. So quite large platforms grew, obviously, Microsoft Windows, the Google ecosystem, Amazon got their own stuff, Salesforce have their different things, and other big CRMs, HubSpot, all that kind of stuff. So these existed. Then what's happened is a lot of them over the last 2 years introduced agents on top of their frameworks to see, okay, now we've got all this, if you think about it like a river, all this water and items flowing through it, these documents and stuff like this. What could we have that could have some value, which we can then agentify? Let's just use those words, for example. So Microsoft came up with Copilot. So it's okay, you're already using Microsoft 365, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, stuff like this. How can we kind of create an assistant which will allow you to do more stuff? Now, their narrative has been ahead of their capability in terms of what people can execute. I will say that Microsoft's very powerful from their ability to be able to customize security permissions, stuff like this. But what that means is that the average business can struggle to actually configure it in the right way, basically, right? And so they might not get the value out of it. So Microsoft Copilot, very powerful tool, able to do lots of things. And I see new things being added on all the time. However, I've also seen a lot of people that maybe tried an earlier version of it and kind of got burnt, and they couldn't get the benefits they wanted. So they may be reluctant to look at new things. So that's kind of like the Microsoft bit of it. Salesforce have obviously gone very, very strong on Agentforce. They've got the two things, which they've obviously got their Salesforce platform, but their platform's very complex. And what it is it's almost an infinitely configurable modular house, let's call it that, right? But they don't sell you a house. You then need to go to some builders or Salesforce consultants who will then say, okay, this is what the house it can be, this is what the door's going to look like, this is what your electric can look like, and I'm going to configure it. So you've spent a lot on the Salesforce.
It's like flat pack AI.
But it's not flat packed because flat packed has an instruction of how it should look. It's just Lego blocks.
It's like a box of just board. Yeah.
Basically, any wire, any light, any whatever, basically, right? Then the point is that you need to kind of have that conversation and stuff. So the point there is that there was a huge kind of secondary dimension you needed for that. And then now they're trying to kind of make it easier. But Salesforce came from a fully configurable possibility model. And now they're trying to move into it does the work for you. But there's a chasm because they never actually set up necessarily the configuration of Salesforce for people and stuff like that. So I think there's some frictions there. And also they've got their billing model because they were making quite a lot from, let's be frank, licenses that aren't used. You know what I mean? So there's many people that for example, have bought things which they can't use in the right way or whatever like that. And they're just kind of locked in that model. So there's that conflict of the new business model and the old business model in that kind of way. Google, they're doing what Google does. They did, for example, very clever bets to kind of ensure that their core business, which is search, or advertising or different stuff like that, is always relevant and distributed across all the different places it could be. So for example, when they bought Android was a loss-making company, but they knew that if they actually provided an infrastructure for all the mobile phone manufacturers in the world that they could customize, but the only bit that Google cared about was its searches through Google, basically, right? they played a clever game. So then everyone else was like, oh, I don't have to develop my own software. I can just use this basically. So I save money there. And yeah, Google is the best one. So I use that. So they're, again, in the new agent world, they're trying to create their own technologies and different stuff. So basically, rather than search just being searched with humans, it might be searched through Google agents or other things. And, for that new dimension, essentially. But they don't play in business software classically, basically, right? Like, apart from their enterprise apps and like stuff like this, like they're more in the other bits. So they'll have a bit of the Copilot stuff. They've got that already embedded within Gemini, embedded within Google Docs and different stuff like this. But you got those different areas. Then you've got point solutions, which are like verticals, which is like, okay, I'm going to be an AI calendar solution for you. So I'm just going to review your calendar and I'm going to tell you what you should change or what not change. And these are kind of personal productivity tools. And it could be your own Evernote, turn into your own personal knowledge base, or it could be, for example, a tool which is going to help you, for example, optimize your email or something like that. All these tend to be like singular areas and they're great to like boost individual productivity. But if you've got a company with like 20 to 200 people, that doesn't fit in because the information lives in a silo. You don't have the ability to like cross communicate and different stuff like that, basically.
Well, it's also, I always call it SaaS creep. So you end up with like 15 different applications, different things.
It's not a problem, but the thing is, you're then limited in what you can benefit from because everything is compartmentalized, right? There's no return on data that you can do in total, basically, right? Like, so I agree with you, right? Like right now, we already have SaaS creep, but moving forward, you actually want to be able to consolidate more so you can actually get more done from your data. Because right now, as you always said, Piers, SaaS only ever does what the medium and the bell curve wants to do, but everyone's got important edge cases, 20 to 30% on either side, essentially, isn't it, right? So it's having that. Then you got the dimensions of open frameworks, which are basically technologies which enable you to do something. In the past, for example, computer vision, you had OpenCV, and you had other different kind of like models, or for example, for some kind of like open source machine learning libraries like PyTorch and things like this. Those were like open source things, and you still got open source things now, but then there's always businesses that spin up around it to provide a supported version of that for large enterprises. So that's where you'll have like larger companies where they've got a massive tech team, like Shopify, for example, or even Klarna. And it's like, we need to build our own stuff because we've got 1,000 developers. Like you're not going to buy someone else's solution. You're going to like rebuild it in the way you want it, essentially. And then that's where those ones are going to come in. But for other businesses, they're going to be in too much trouble because no one was building kind of custom software. And I know vibe coding is a thing, but not for scalable, repeatable things across a bigger company. I'm not saying startups, I'm talking bigger companies, basically, where they've already got set processes essentially in place, right?
And then the slot in there, there's a one I've missed really, which is the middle ground, isn't it? Which is where you have a SaaS, a bit like Salesforce, but smaller scale, where they're now adding AI. And often it's quite basic.
Because it'll just basically like accelerate whatever function it does, essentially, isn't it, right? So it's like, whether it was, let's just say, for example, it was calendar management, right? It'll add an AI component to that. Or let's say it's a CRM. You'll have like rather than you writing your own email, it might help you with an email or something like that, basically, isn't it? You got those dimensions. And then you got what we're focused on at Implement AI, which is like, if you take a step backwards, in every single department, in every single company, there's a constraint. And it's like, okay, if we could unlock this constraint by contacting more customers or increasing our weekend support or preventing churn on different people or discussing different things, then we could grow. So in order to do that, you need a digital worker in that department, whether it's sales support, customer success, operational excellence, analysis, whatever, basically, right? And then it's like, how do I get that to work? Because I don't have developers. I don't have the budget to be able to like figure stuff out. I need to kind of get that worked on. And that's what we've focused on solving, which is like making it like easy for businesses, like normal businesses, to deploy digital workers essentially in that regard. So I think that's
what we call agentic CRM. So you've got one common memory as well.
Yes. So you can then consolidate your memory because like essentially the point here is like for all these businesses, right? It's like how much data can you capture and how much data can you act on? That's really it, right? Like for example, like if you think about some medical CRMs, for example, you have a huge amount of data inside it, but you can't actually interrogate it because it's a PDF or it's like some notes from a visit and there's no way to actually search and see everything. Those things will come, but you're then bolting stuff onto like an existing kind of model, essentially, right? Like, and I think that the difference would be is like you've got like a massive building with different rooms which got different stuff in, versus the new model is like you got the Amazon warehouse where you're standing in one place and the robots bring stuff to you. You understand, so there's a very difference in those two things, and you can't get that second experience where you're sitting here and depending on someone's shopping list, those, that you've seen those robots, like on the wheels, they pick with the pallets and come bring it to you. And then you've got like 6 different ones coming to you. So you're much more efficient rather than you going to 10 different rooms and then searching, intelligent search in 10 different rooms, basically, right? So.
And I think, and also, so what we talk about, we'll move on to the second half in a second, is that this confusion of this kind of what I call it the PR frontier, right, which is just noise, people putting anything to your press release so they can raise some money. And then you've got this jagged technological frontier, which is important to understand because it is jagged because it depends on what you're doing, where you are, how it impacts you. Then you've got what we call the operational frontier, which is where we play actually, which is where does as you said, Aalok, where does the AI rubber hit the operational the production road? That's where we focus. Important to understand what's going on at the outside. Very quickly comes the inside. I was reading a post this morning about Ethan Mollick, this sort of Izzy Wharton professor at AI, and he was saying that like ChatGPT 03 that he's playing with quite a lot right now, just that, if you just stop there, so now in artificial intelligence, within 5 years, that would change a lot of what we do. So that's I say operational frontier, but again, that's going to be retired quite soon. Or these kind of token-based models like 4 and 3.5, they're all going to be thinking models. So really understand is what can you deploy in your business today that works, and as you also focus on that a lot, there's a measurable ROI basically. And now you see things like, almost like, for all intents and purposes, infinite context windows. You can upload almost any document. And they're not vague like they used to be where they miss the middle. They're actually very, very accurate, 95% plus. They'll find one line that you've inserted that's incongruous in a Harry Potter series, the whole lot.
I think if you think about things we started 2 years ago, and it's quite funny, I saw some memories came up on my feed of posts from a couple of years ago. I was just reading some of those ones. It was quite interesting. But if you think about at that time, it was more about CEOs and potentially CTOs understanding and CIOs understanding the possibilities of AI and what does it mean and what can it do for our company and different stuff like this. And I find now the conversation is moved on to COOs now, basically, right? So it's no, I get it. I know it'll do stuff. The question is, what will it do for us, basically, right? And which departments can I use it in today, and go from there? Because the COO's got a different mindset. They're not trying to do a different, something in 6 months or whatever. It's I have this pain point today. I'm either hiring someone or I'm using this, basically, isn't it, right? So maybe this brings us to the next department, essentially.
Let's say a bit more about what we do, guys. We've got an event on the 20th of June. If you're in London, if you can get there, it's near Moorgate. There's 12 till about 3, maybe 3:30 p.m. And that's going to be going through, as we're talking about here, how do you actually put artificial intelligence, generative AI, to work in your business? We're also going to be showcasing more about our AI OS. Had about 116 people last time. If you can get down there, follow us on social media, you'll find the various links, and we'll probably post again today. You can go download our white papers. We've got a great white paper called How to Implement AI. And that's going to go through also use cases, how you should think about it, how you should approach it, how your organization should approach it as well. And if you enjoy this podcast, please share it. We're trying to scale this up, trying to get it out there to more people, and subscribe on YouTube as well. Help us out there. Now, let's talk about this. I think this is a really important question that people dance around. And implement AI, we don't dance around stuff. We just sort of hit them head on. And this is, what are those C-suite executives you just mentioned there, or what are they buying, right? Are they really buying augmentation, which is what people like to talk about, or are they buying human placement? So let's talk about that at a high level. And I think some good examples out there. So you see people like Klarna. We're not going to hire 700 people. We don't need to. We're going to use artificial intelligence. And more recently, the CEO of Spotify, he's now said to his team, you're not hiring anybody until you've proven to me that AI can't do it.
Agree. And then you got Shopify and all these different people. You got Salesforce, they even said they're not hiring more developers, and you got all these different areas, basically, right? So I think this gives that very fundamental question, essentially, augment or replace. And conversations I'm having, and again, this is because of the kind of work that we do, and the kind of agents we focus on, I'm tending to see it's more about, it's not replacing people that are doing something currently, unless it's an outsourced provider. So let's look at that bit. I am seeing conversations around replacing outsourced providers. So when they've got, for example, an external call center, or they've got an external BPO, business process outsourcing company, or someone doing something in an external way, they are looking at how AI could bring that in-house and give them more control over that, basically, right? So I am seeing that, essentially, in that degree. And that's where the conversations come down to, speed, quality, cost, capability, new things that we can add in, which could then allow, a better service to different people in that. So the question when it comes down to augmentation or replacement, basically, right? That's when I'm seeing, I am seeing the conversation about replacement when it comes to organizations replacing an external provider. So as an example, it might be a company that has an outsourced call center that answers things on the weekends and evenings, or it might be someone that actually has, an outsourced business process outsourcing company, which is doing some elements of their customer support in that kind of way. So those areas, I am seeing the conversation around how could we bring that in-house using AI, but also what new capabilities could we unlock? So very, very examples I've seen with some companies is like, we are launching in America or some other places, and could we provide regional support, like regional accents or regional things like this? Or even in the UK, for example, as I talked about someone about their customers in Newcastle versus Liverpool and even Ireland, and they could provide a more local experience using AI, basically with voices and different things like this. So I am seeing replacement conversations for outsourced providers, right? I am not seeing it that I've got 10 people and I don't want to have it, but I am seeing on the second thing, where I've had conversations with some companies, and these are some active conversations right now, where it's like, right now I have 50 salespeople, and right now we're producing this much. And every month we're hiring this many new salespeople, and then, they last 3 months, and then the ones that aren't doing, they get left. I am interested in seeing how AI could help us increase the volume of leads, or turbocharge some of those by going after more people first and doing stuff. So I am seeing that level of augmentation where typically AI agents will take over an unattended part of the business. When I say unattended, I mean that like a typical salesperson can reactivate a certain number of leads, but they can't go through all of them basically, right? Or they might be able to analyze a certain number of like sales meetings, but they can't analyze the last 3 months and stuff like that, right? So the point there is like, you typically get the AI agent in a kind of new value creation opportunity that it would not have been cost effective to hire a person for. And then you're using that to see if that works, then I won't hire more people in that department, basically, right? So they're the two ways I'm seeing it. Replacing an external provider, like a business process outsourcing or call center, or it's like, augmenting the existing team I've got by helping make sure you've got like more workers in the department for sales, or more workers in the department for support, or more workers in the department for operational excellence, for compliance and stuff like that. In that way, basically.
There's a third one, isn't there, which is maybe analytics, so we call agent DEX, which is doing things that humans just can't do.
Yeah, exactly. So within operational excellence, you've got like detecting new opportunities, or, like finding, helping contact and customize conversations with certain patients or customers to like reactivate them in a particular way, or detecting missed opportunities, and absolutely, and doing things you couldn't do. And also, I'm not talking about the dimension of, there are conversations and work we do with people where they're offering a new type of service using AI. So that doesn't fit into augment or replace, basically, right? Because that's actually just a new thing where, like, for example, consulting firms may want to be able to, like, offer their knowledge in a different way. Or you've got, like, certain types of professional service firms that are trying to offer certain types of AI tools or systems to their customers, which will augment their services or provide new models in that kind of way, basically.
When I was researching with this pod, I found out we've got a similar thing, but it's quite an interesting model, actually, which is, augment or replace, essentially. And there are different factors. So it's called 3V plus R. So there's value. If an agent took it over, how much money, time, or strategic upside would you gain? There's variance. How predictable is that task? Input is outcome. Low variance equals, the same steps every single time, essentially. Lots of education, nuance, and judgment makes it more complicated. Then you've got velocity. How much throughput do you need, and how fast can humans do it, or agents, which is really important. Then you've got risk, and risk can be quite complicated in sectors like healthcare or financial services. And we always say, don't worry about the regulated activity, like the diagnosis or the prescription, but everything else you should be looking at. So you've got risk. So let's just go through those quickly. So, and then if you add those all together and you're quite low, you probably want to replace. You can make it fully autonomous. So there's low risk. You need throughput. There's not much variance, for example. If you're in the middle, you're augmenting. And if it's quite high, you're probably retaining or human input, humans in the loop, or kind of redesigning a whole operational model. So you've done some of the things like in terms of capacity and things like that. So let's talk about value. So if an agent took this over, how much money, time, or upside would you actually gain?
Exactly. So that's a very key thing. And this is like, for example, if you think about like new businesses which are starting AI first, for example, right? So let's just talk about let's say it's a professional services firm which works in 3 industries. Let's give that example, for example, right? So they currently work with like 3 types of industries, but those industries are not doing great, let's just say, right? And they're kind of going down, right? But they can't go after new industries because they don't have the people or the manpower to do that. So in that situation, agents could do tests in different industries, which would be like, okay, can we unlock customers in industry 1, industry 2, industry 3? And the first green shoots that they see with this opportunity, then they can actually like take over it. So in that situation, could be a lot of value unlocked, because if you're working harder and harder in a declining industry, it's getting worse and worse. But at the same time, if you could prove that there is opportunity in a few different other industries by agents taking that over, that could be a great way to unlock some value there, basically.
And then low variance predictability or low variability.
So variance, I would probably say I would also like look at the same steps each time, high variance, lots of things. Yeah, I think like you want to have something which is like quite clear, like in terms of what the defined output is, because any kind of computer model, it's like, what's the input and what's the defined output look like? Doesn't matter about the variance of conversations. Like, for example, if you know what the output is, like booking an appointment or not booking an appointment, or, qualifying interest or not qualifying interest. So those things. But also what I would also look at is like how, not fragile is the wrong word, but like how sensitive is that subject, basically, right? So for example, let's say you're dealing with someone, let's just say, for example, for a funeral home, right? Answering the phone when someone's passed away, right? I mean, you're not taking huge numbers of calls in those situations. And I think in that situation, you really do want to talk to a person. Now, you could have AI assistants for like, here's what's going to happen, and we're going to keep you up to date to like, what's happening with the body and different stuff. Because I just literally heard about stuff like where there's massive delays and backlogs, and, people can be, delayed for a month or something, and that could be quite worrying. So in that situation, actually having AI, which you could ask questions about, like, tell me about this or what about this, and keep you updated, that could help you in that way. But elements of like where it's sensitive and emotional, maybe you don't want AI in that area. So I think variance is like how repeatable it is and how acceptable that area is, basically, within that area, I would say.
So let's do velocity then. So there's the speed of that, the throughput. And the research I was looking at was saying that if it's higher velocity, you might not want to automate it, which I kind of disagree with, actually. Because I know when you were in New York, they were saying there's some super high velocity AI.
Yeah, I think velocity is not actually a factor, because we actually have live agents which are dealing with like millions of things at the same time, basically, right? And so in that situation, it's more about like how clearly defined it is and what you're trying to get done, basically, right? And I definitely think things, if you're looking at like, real time or doing thousands per day, you've actually got more benefits with AI, because your cost per task with agents is always going to be lower than a human, basically, right? The question then is like, are there other steps in that value chain which rely on a person, which would then get backlogged? Because that's the way it tends to work, basically. Because it's about AI agents in your business, and it's how many of the complete work cycles can you complete, basically, right? So, and if there's people on one side of it, then that might be a blocker, essentially.
And risk, we were talking to a potential customer the other day, where they have a process where a customer fills out a form, they analyze it, they compare it to previous data, and they actually make a diagnosis. And they were quite worried about the diagnosis. And we kind of say, well, don't worry about the regulated point, the point to the regulated activity. But everything around that is like any other business, isn't it?
There's always a regulated person. So let's separate this out, right? So regulated people, pharmacist, doctor, accountant, lawyer, whatever it is like that, they're responsible for disseminating professional standards and the knowledge of that profession in the way it is. So that's the person bit, right? And there'll be specialized softwares for each of those things, but the judgment still stays with the person. Even if you're using X-ray, MRI, AI, MRI software to like detect stuff for you, it doesn't abdicate you the responsibility to actually check it and make sure there wasn't any, cancers or anything like that within there, basically, right? So that's that part of it. However, in regulated industries and risk industries, actually AI can be brilliant, because, like, for example, there's some examples with some customers that we're talking with where they've got people manually reviewing conversations or calls or meetings to see, was there any regulated risk introduced in this conversation based on someone saying something that they shouldn't have, or not explaining all the terms and conditions, or potentially mis-selling or showing something like this. Their AI can be brilliant, because it can actually detect for you through every single conversation, because before, people would take a snapshot of calls or meetings and audit that to see from a snapshot, do we have any issues? Now you can know from every single one, because the AI could review every single one, basically, right? So I think there's the kind of elements within there, but I think that element of like, what's the downside if it goes wrong? It's like making sure that you've got that process to be able to like document, track, and then evaluate everything, essentially. And you can have double agents. You can have one reviewing it and one checking it as well, for example, right?
I was about to say, and on the other side of that, you can then have compliance, which can be automated, which is Absolutely. Looking back, even what were the humans doing? Did that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
So that's great. So that gives you, if you're thinking about, augmentation, replacement, or doing things that, humans can't do, that's kind of an interesting model to start looking at your business. And Alok's mentioned there, which is very helpful, lots of use cases. So we're going to leave it there. We'll also do about 30 minutes. We're about 30 minutes in now. So that gives you an idea. Now, we'll talk about two things there, really. One is about the technological frontier, the state of AI. So you need to understand that, and people make the mistake all the time when I have conversations with them. They focus on AI today, right? And we are in the dial-up internet era of artificial intelligence, right? I don't believe that everybody for years is going to be using AI like we're currently use Spellcheck or calculator. There's going to be a huge variance in capability of what AI you use, and what you said, Aalok, actually, which is how capable are you at actually using that tool? Because that makes a massive, massive difference.
Yeah.
And the technological frontier, all this stuff we're hearing about at the outside, within 6 months to a year, will be available in production. So think about that. So always think about where is it going and how can I implement where it's likely to go into my business, not just what we've got today. So once again, thanks for joining us. We've got our event on 20th of June. Sign up for that if you can get to London. It'd be worth it, trust me. There's some great feedback for the last event. Read our white papers. Please follow us on YouTube. Give the podcast a review. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again very soon.
See you next time.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Implement AI podcast. If you're interested in learning more about how we can assist you and your business in leveraging AI for growth and efficiency, visit our website at implementai.io. Don't forget to subscribe to the Implement AI podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you listen to stay updated on future episodes. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.